Good evening. Thank you, Fred, for that lovely introduction. My friend, Lieutenant Governor Guadagno, who I've known for, we're trying to figure 25 or 26 years. Chris Rodriguez, my friend, who's the Director of New Jersey Office of Homeland Security. Congressman Frelinghuysen, I saw you dash over for the Pledge of Allegiance. Nice to see you, sir. And to the members of the Board of Freeholders, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this ceremony in this really spectacular location. I come to Morris County all the time, but I have never actually seen this memorial, and you've done an outstanding job in bringing together all the things about this day and about that event, that tragedy that really matters. So I congratulate you and I thank you for that. This morning, on the relatively early side, many of us abandoned our normal routines, which might ordinarily include a morning run, going to church, or in my case, a trip to Starbucks or the bagel store or to one of my son's baseball games. But instead, this morning, I went to Eagle Rock Reservation in West Orange with hundreds of others at a special memorial that was built in that spot next to Highlawn Pavilion with a spectacular view of the New York City skyline. And like this evening, we gathered as a community to mark the day that touched all of us, that changed all of our lives, and that in many ways changed the country. It was a day that began with acts caused by the worst, the most evil, the cruelest of men. But it was a day that also evolved so quickly into one that was marked by acts that showed the best of who we are. Now, 15 years later, the anniversary of 9/11 continues to bring us together, not just here in this community in Morris County, but all over New Jersey and all across the United States. And as we gather, there are two things about which I am entirely certain. We know, and we are reminded all too often, that the hatred and evil that we saw, that we witnessed, that we experienced that day have not left us. Yes, it was the most deadly act on American soil since Pearl Harbor. But there have been other horrible tragedies born of the same impulses, the same hate, the same goals. Orlando, San Bernardino, Paris are just three that come to mind, but we all remember and can recite others. But we also know, and we prove it again by gathering here, that we are not bowed, we are not deterred, we are not stopped by those acts or those goals. It is exactly the opposite. The anniversary of this day and the way the American people behaved and react to that challenge continues to inspire our shared pursuit of peace, security, and justice. Just 2 days ago, on Friday morning, I was at a ceremony hosted by my friend Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security for the United States, commemorating the fact that the federal government agencies have officially moved into 6 floors of the new Freedom Tower at One World Trade Center, the building that Fred just talked about. 1,776 feet high. No accident of architecture, as you all know, but a number that was picked because it rings with the spirit of American independence, of liberty, and resilience. A spirit that doesn't quit in the face of an enemy, but instead fights harder and rebuilds something beautiful. That's just who we are. For terrorists to win, we have to be terrorized. But that's not who we are. We are not terrorized. We all remember vividly where we were that Tuesday morning. I was on the DeCamp 66 bus from Montclair to New York, and one of the passengers, listening to what we quaintly used then, a transistor radio, those of you who are under the age of 20 have no idea what that is, reported that first one and then the second tower had been struck by airplanes. At first, we were all pretty sure it was a mistake, that it hadn't happened, or there was a lone pilot with a tiny plane who had gone off course or was impaired in some way. But as we learned more, and we learned more, we had a bit of an argument with our driver, and we finally prevailed on him to turn around at the very bottom of the helix in Hoboken to get off Route 3 and Route 495 and turn around so that we could go back to Essex County. I returned home to watch TV with my wife, who was 4 months pregnant with my older son Ian, who is now 14 and a half. And to show you how we mark time, just a few weeks ago, at the age of 14 and a half, Ian became the tallest member of the Fishman family. Now, that is not much of a hurdle, I will admit. But still, as I look around and I see a very small young man over there in a t-shirt that is 40 times his size, we all know that that is how we measure and mark the passage of those 15 years, to watch the kids who were then kids grow up. But I also will never forget the collapse of those towers, or the stunned feeling of helplessness and disbelief that washed over all of us as we watched. And that feeling was particularly acute for those of us who at that point were not in law enforcement. I had left the Department of Justice, was in private practice, and was one of the reasons why I was so eager to come back into public service. None of us will ever forget the nearly 3,000 innocent people, 700 from New Jersey, 64 from Morris County, murdered and ripped without warning from the families and friends and colleagues who loved them. But as much as I, and as all of us, remember those images, we will also remember and be inspired forever by the stunning examples of bravery, by the outpouring of compassion, and by the spirit of unity that was the collective reaction of the American people. While the hatred of terrorists could destroy buildings, physical symbols of our strength and success, they couldn't destroy the energy and the freedom that built those buildings. Today, as we take out the time from our ordinary Sunday routine to reflect on those we lost and to mourn yet again as a community with those whose loss was so personal, we also remind ourselves to comfort and attend to the survivors and the families of those who were not so lucky. And as we pay our respects to those no longer with us, we are also grateful to and so thankful for the heroes who inspire us. The police, the fighter fighters, the EMTs, who, without thinking about themselves and ignoring the destruction and death that waited for them, ran into those burning buildings and up the stairs, knowing that the safest course was actually with those who were escaping in the opposite direction. All of us are humbled and moved by the utter selflessness and courage of those men and women which they display every day across the country. Those of you who are here today in law enforcement representing your peers, we thank you. And we're also moved and inspired by the ordinary citizens, those with no training and no professional obligation to help, who stopped in those same smoky stairwells to help utter strangers who were having a harder time than they were. Their example, and the example of every other person who chose in the aftermath of 9/11 to do something, to dig through the rubble, to counsel the grieving, to stand vigil, to give money, to donate blood, to volunteer for our armed forces. All of those people make this commemoration not just a memorial for those we lost. Those people make this day a celebration of the American spirit, a celebration of our collective resilience, a celebration of our refusal, individually and together, to be beaten or threatened or cowed by any enemy. It's a reminder in these days in which we seem so divided that we have so much more that can and should bind us together. It's also a reminder to those of us in the United States Department of Justice and in law enforcement generally of two different parts of our mission. First, to do everything we can, everything that the law and the Constitution allow to protect our homeland and our communities, to root out plots, to stop attacks, to investigate and prosecute those who threaten and do cause us harm. But second, we also recognize, because we're the Department of Justice, that we have to protect all the members of every community. There is no place for hate. There is no room for stereotyping, no tolerance for those who try to cast the net of blame too widely and brand those at fault simply because they practice another religion. We are and have to be better than that. For more than 200 years, our country has seen crisis after crisis, and each time we have rallied to our collective commitment, stated so elegantly in the preamble to the Constitution, to form a more perfect union. 15 years after 9/11, our country is stronger and more secure, our enemies are severely weakened, and our resolve to bring terrorists to justice and to live the values that have always defined the United States remains undimmed. So today, in memory of those who lost their lives on September 11th, and to honor them and the service of our heroes, we remind ourselves of our obligation. We acknowledge our responsibility we accept our challenge and we renew our oath to ensure our country's security and to advance the cause of justice. Together, we can make our country even greater and even stronger. God bless the United States of America.